I've worked for other companies and other banks, and it was just where you go to work, you do your job, you go home. Happy State Bank, you don't. I mean, it's still work, but you feel comfortable at work. You're happy. You spend a lot of time at work, and when you enjoy your coworkers and enjoy what you're doing, then it's great. And Happy State Bank's a great bank. When you're enjoying your job and you're enjoying your atmosphere, your coworkers, then it does rub off. Your customers see that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Item number 1, minutes of last week's Wednesday meeting. Item number 2, second and final, changing the speed limit on North Coulter. Any questions, comments?
Now, in my mind, which is not reliable, tells me that Coulter was never connected back to the Coulter like that runs to the hospitals.
Between like Tascosa Road and Ninth
Yeah.
Street, I mean, I wouldn't say never, but it's going to be a ways. There's some big challenges.
Because it happened to cross the creek.
And I think there'd actually be 2, from what I've been told, bridges that would have to be built.
And it again isn't a straight line. I mean, it's
No, it can't be, or it won't come out to
not
the
a
spot.
concrete issue.
Okay, so my mind did not abandon it.
No, we're good.
Was there a reason to name that Coulter, the other section over by Papaloma?
Don't know. It's been Coulter since West
Been here
Cliff
long
was
now.
built, and West Cliff was built
Oh, it has been.
30 years ago.
Okay.
Or at least the first part of it was built back then.
That was it.
It's the widest vertical.
And it's, that's the piece that's not straight. Where Coulter runs through the West Cliff part, it is straight. Once you hit Fairway, it starts to get some feature to it.
Yeah.
And that continues now all the way to the North Loop. It's all the way through.
Okay.
Just right back in. Item number 3, second and final on the vacation, and that's right over here in the middle. Okay, 4 and 5, public hearings. These are both to review and to consider ordering the removal of. First one today is at 304 North Prospect Street. The second is at 1712 North Hughes. With your permission, I'd like to see if we can help out with this. As you recall, because of the lawsuits that came out of Dallas, we're doing these in a totally different manner than what we had done before. We've done it once this way. We have rewritten the mayor's script. He's basically the presiding judge as we go through. After the process is followed, it then falls to the commission to make a determination of one of the different things that are listed in your resolutions in your packet. Keep from having to flip back and forth as we go through the hearings, we have lifted from those resolutions those 5 actions that you may consider. So I'm going to pass those out, and they're numbered at the top, item 4, item 5.
I
You got,
went over this to you.
okay. Well, I have 2, okay.
You got 4 for both properties.
1 for each. If you finish item 4, just
Oh, okay.
let it go, and we'll
Don't
start
have
on
to
number
keep
5.
going back.
Okay. As you go through the process, you'll hear from the building official, you'll hear from the owner and or the interested parties. And
I have a question about that, because it got last time, do we have to define interested parties? Is it some property relation? Is there any?
Well, it's someone with a legal interest,
Okay.
and we've underlined that, or at least in one draft it was underlined to emphasize you're now going to list people with a legal interest in this property. And then later you will ask for, now, are there neighbors or anyone else who has to address?
Because I think the last time one person got up was first it was interested neighbor.
Right.
But wanted to be gone.
Right.
We didn't know that that was the pattern.
Well, it's certainly not fatal. It's just a matter of trying to go through it orderly and give the people with the most paramount interest the first opportunity to speak.
But if we recognize somebody's just a neighbor and wants it gone, we should ask that you be able to speak in a moment.
Yes, we'll hear from you in a moment.
And we've split those on your script so that you're very deliberately calling first those legally interested parties.
People have skin in the game.
All right,
And then second, the neighbors.
Lien holders, mortgage companies, you never know.
Here's
You go to legal interest in the property.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So as the mayor takes us through the script, you'll of course have your opportunity to ask any questions of the building official of any of the witnesses that appear before you. But at the end, the commission then picks one or more of these actions that you'll take. And, let's kind of walk right through them if we could. The option, little letter 1, you find after looking at the evidence, the structure is not dangerous. The first 4 are specifically for structures. The structure is not dangerous, therefore we're dismissing the matter. Failing that, item number 2, the commission says we find this structure or any other improvement of any kind or a part thereof is dangerous and we order it to be removed. Number 2, that's your demolition right there. Number 3, we do find it's dangerous. We do order it removed. However, we find good cause exists to grant a reprieve to allow the interested persons to seek, qualify for, to obtain a provisional permit, basically to go and to remedy it. Item 4.
Now, how long is that reprieve good for?
Well, it says that this continued living there, the reprieve granted shall expire upon the latter of the expiration of time to apply for and obtain a provisional permit or the expiration of the permit. The ordinance has a time limit for when you have to apply for that permit.
And of course, this would be a building permit.
A form of it, yes.
Or a demolition permit.
What is the normal lifetime?
A normal building permit's 180 days. The provisional permit under this process is 60 days.
Okay, so it's not real onerous, or
No.
it doesn't just keep kicking this can down the road?
But you could apply for another if the first one
If
expired.
substantial progress had been made. That the key to this one is down at the bottom of that paragraph. If the building official finds that they have abated those issues, then your order to have it demolished is moot. But if they have not, your order stands. It does not come back to you on the demolition process.
So it's handled administratively. But that would only be used when you saw that there's an ability to fix it and they prove an ability to do it.
Yes.
Financial ability to do it.
So related to that is the next one, number 4. You would find the good cause exists to defer the adjudication of the case and direct the reinstatement or the extension of a permit that they already had, a prior provisional permit. You pick that time period, it cannot exceed the 60 days. Okay? The difference in this one, you're looking at a structure that maybe they have just pulled a permit, maybe they've made some progress, not substantial progress. You're granting them their discretion, okay, I'll give you 30 days to make good or to prove that, up to 60, your discretion. At the end of this one, if they've not done anything, it does have to come back to you. We set another hearing and you reconsider it on its merits at that time.
But you set the hearing after the time period is expired.
Exactly, after that reprieve has expired.
And how long, once you set that date, does it take for that to transpire? Another 60 days?
I would say 2 weeks, based on those two.
I just want to avoid us setting up for longer runs, which is what you've done by reading the law.
Doing the ordinance.
And does the history of any one of these properties lead us to, have any one of them ever have a provisional permit?
These two today, I don't think there are any prior permits.
Okay, so 4 doesn't apply to today at all.
And that will be part of the building official's presentation as he goes through his files, not just today, but on all of these cases in the future. He'll give you the procedural history, and you'll know if there was a provisional permit issued or not.
You know, if they had water service, if they have taxes, anything to that effect. Okay. Those first four to deal with structures. The next one, this is what we've historically called the J and D, the junk and debris. This is where you look at the property and you say there's, to quote this, an accumulation of rubbish, trash, solid waste, and/or unsanitary matter. Reason this is different, you may well have a property come to you that, were it not for the accumulation of car tires, mattresses, etc., the structure is okay. So you're not going to order that structure down, you're going to order the property to be cleaned up. Preserve the building. Okay?
I thought we already had an ordinance. It was like this.
We have a way to do this for minor cases without it ever having to come up here, or we will order a contractor in.
And if they, if the owner doesn't pay for it, then it's attached to
It attaches to the building.
But this is for more severe cases, so
Yes.
this is where a guy's got a junkyard.
And may well be for commercial property
Gotcha.
rather than residential. I mean, most of what we see are residential. And we've recently done the service station at Port Arthur. So that was one, it's commercial property. The apartment complex over on 7th or 8th? 7th. Next
I 40 in
to,
Nelson.
No,
Did you do Arthur too?
we did I-40 in Arthur.
Arthur.
The service station?
Yeah, I thought you did.
Oh, that was
Nelson.
Nelson.
Nelson,
Yeah,
yeah, I was gonna
Nelson
say, there's no
is
service
ours.
station on ours.
Yeah.
Nelson.
What'd you tear down today?
Yeah, well, you know, one of those address things. The other thing to remember about this final one, you may well have one, and I think you'll see one today, at least for consideration, that you have both a dangerous structure and the trash and the debris. So if that were the case, you would consider one of your options, 1 through 4, and consider this option.
Does somebody need to read this formally into the deal?
Whomever makes the motion,
Okay.
Commissioner Sims, if it was his motion, he would pick one or more of these, and you don't read the resolution, but read the option that you've selected. I move that we approve on item number 4, the resolution with the following. I find the structure is not a dangerous one or marked by accumulation, etc.
Just strike the word "or" at the end of it, verse 3.
Now, how does this differ, for example, we all know of residential structures that get cleaned out, they don't go through this body? Does that result in a lien as well?
Can if they don't pay for it.
If they don't pay it?
Yes.
So what is the difference between going through this process and just going ahead and cleaning it up when you know you're not going to get paid?
Well, here's none in that sense. The difference between those getting cleaned up by staff action versus one getting cleaned up by city commission action is a matter of the dollar value at stake. Is that right, Scott?
And we all know
A
that as staff,
significant
we cannot,
accumulation.
as staff, take somebody's home down, you have to order.
I understand,
that.
I'm just thinking about this trash,
Well, the legal remedy is the same in that standpoint.
but the
The
cost
legal-
is an issue.
A significant accumulation where it's gonna have a greater value that we wanna make sure there's due process.
It's one thing to go out there and pick up
Tires.
an old tire and a lawnmower. It's another thing to go out there and start picking up car engines and things that may have intrinsic value, significant bulkage perhaps. You may recall, sometime in the last couple of years, a very graphic picture looking down the side of a house in a 6-foot, 8-foot wood fence, and it was 3 or 4 feet deep. You would have been walking on top of hot water heaters, bicycles, lawnmowers, tires, water hoses. It was incredible, the amount of debris and junk that was piled up there. And, of course, the neighbors were complaining about rats and snakes and mosquitoes.
Was that on the north side of town?
I don't recall.
No.
But that would be one where, you know, those things have some, usually you can see it has intrinsic value, the scrap metal if nothing else. And with that kind of significant accumulation, that's a decision for the governing body, not for staff. again, versus just a house that has knee-high weeds.
Right.
The effect is no different. The magnitude is the difference.
All the legal remedies are the same in terms of our ability to charge the owner. If the owner doesn't pay, to assess the lien. We can only foreclose on that lien when it's coupled with unpaid taxes, but all those rules are the same.
And so the building safety just kind of makes a judgment call, piece of placement, you know, one by one.
Correct.
I got you.
Most of our junk and debris complaints that we address at the staff level are only going to carry value of a few $100s.
So commonly, we'd see this one tacked on to one of these in this kind of an order. We won't see as many that are just the bottom one.
That's correct.
Yes.
Common. Could, but.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, we're learning about it, but I'm glad we're doing this. So are the neighbors.
It's a whole new process. We do have, if you would like them, new copies of the whole resolution for 4 and 5. And just based on these exact questions, I'll point out there's only one difference in it. And that difference is in that last option, the way it was worded in your packet, it referenced back to structures and the junk and the debris, the accumulation. The structure part of that needs to be out and be separate. If not, you don't have an option in those rare cases to only have them clean it up and not take down the actual structures that you might find.
Okay.
So, but there's one of these, they're each titled for the specific item.
What do you say, well, everybody? so
One
you said
for each.
got it.
So, should keep us from having to go back and forth in our resolution. Okay, all good questions, and as last time, if you see anything, once we get in here and go through this script or something, we can clean up, tweak, do better. We've shortened the script dramatically from where we were the last time. I think we'll get better at it. There's a whole queue of these starting to line up, so we're gonna get busy. We've got to do it in a manner that satisfies those rulings that came out of Dallas, but we need to be able to move our way through them. So, hope this helps today, and if not,
Yeah,
It'll be-
it
looks
clears
like
it up.
it'll be easier. It's shorter too.
Are we gonna hear specifics during this meeting, or just on the dice?
out here, you'll see the photographs, you'll hear all of the past information, then the owners or the interested parties first, and then the neighbors if they choose. We now put the signs up, you know, in front of those properties. If y'all, anybody have a chance to go look at these,
Yeah,
it's pretty obvious, and the good thing is with the signs that are going up, it lets the neighborhood know we're working. We're trying to get out here.
Interestingly, when I went to one out here, I think it was the second one, there were two neighbors that were sort of a chain link fence next to it. There were two neighbors just standing there and saying, and you could tell they were just saying, finally, it's coming down, and they're pointing to that building. They were.
That's the one on Prospect. You'll see that same photo out there. So you can notice.
The one we had last week on North Grand, some guy is really trying to improve his property out there, and just the one south of him is the one that's really, there's about three. And I bet you he's the one that pushed it, because his property just is not going to be improved till it's gone.
And that's, those come up on the 22nd. We'll have all the details on those then. Okay,
Good.
questions,
Good job, Scott.
ideas on 4 or 5?
Let's get more of them.
Okay, consent agenda. Consent item A, annual purchase of liquid ferrous chloride. Fancy word for something to help the sewers not stink so bad during the summer.
Neutralizer.
And people might not agree that it totally neutralizes, it helps. It helps. Item B, purchase of computer hardware, various and assorted items coming in there, all approved in the budget. We buy almost all of our computer hardware from the state cooperative, which is the Department of Information Resources. Item C, tax abatement agreement for Bell Helicopter Textron. This is for the new facility that's going in out there. We wanted to accommodate the Relentless, the civilian helicopter. This is a piece of the land that you put into the reinvestment zone that was requested by the Amarillo Economic Development Corporation. So that is working, and your first tenant's taking advantage of that.
Have two of their buildings now gone back on the tax rolls?
I believe there's two of the abatements that have fully expired, and I think that just really shows how these work, which is really not different than how a tax increment reinvestment zone works for downtown. You provide that benefit as they're getting ramped up and in the full, whatever their production might be, and then you receive the full benefit at the end of it.
Abatements were for 10 years.
10. The point just hasn't come up, but it's totally conceivable with some of the big projects that are out there. You can never rebate something once it was done. You abated the taxes on a property worth $1 million. Abatement expires, comes on your tax roll, it's $1 million. At some point in the future, if they were to add a $500,000 expansion to it, you could consider that, but you can never rebate.
That's part of it, but not the original meeting.
It's only new stuff. So they don't get to go into the well twice.
Okay, and if in that period somebody really doesn't produce anything, taxes, it just falls by the wayside.
Yeah, you're not, in effect, losing anything because there was nothing generated unless and until they generate it.
Okay.
But also the value at the end of the 10 maybe two.
Exactly.
Maybe what?
2 million.
And hopefully it is.
Yeah.
Would be.
I think the two places you've got these commonly, the airport and Centerport, both are going to see some pretty good appreciation.
Okay.
And Kelly, is George Herring going to be here today?
George Herring and somebody else.
JJ?
AJ Cromer?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Item D, amendment to the automated red light program service contract and the right-of-way use contract. This follows up on the discussions that were held by your advisory committee and then subsequently by the city commission. We have now run the suggestions back through all of the various parties, which primarily is ATS, American Traffic Solutions, and TxDOT. This would remove the Pierce and Third, the one right down here, and reinstall it at Amarillo Boulevard and Tascosa Road, and then add 3 more. So it's 4 installations with a net growth of 3 to your system.
Okay, I would like to pull this one off,
Okay.
and I would like to discuss that.
Pull for separate.
Yes. And we can discuss it now. We can just discuss it.
Well, let's discuss it now, and we may need to again out there.
Okay. You know, I think when we originally launched this program of red light cameras, I think it was a safety issue. And if you recall, one of the issues was we were really kind of behind the curve on our police officers. And one of the big arguments, you were there, one of the big arguments was, can we really have officers spending a lot of their time monitoring dangerous intersections when they're having to take emergency calls? We've really done a lion's share of work budgetarily and categories to increase the number of officers and increase officers. So I think that does really speak to the initial intentions for why we need the red light camera program. Issue number 2 is that I think this committee, this red light camera committee, I think there's a difference in what the impression of their charge was. Okay? The way the documents read here is that this was their recommendation that we add these lines. That is not what members of that committee, when you talk to them, that's not their direct read of that situation. The impression of some of the members of that committee were, we do not add those cameras. The commission adds those cameras. They may want 0, they may want who knows how many.
And you're speaking from the standpoint that they don't have the authority.
Right.
We have the authority.
We have the authority.
Yeah.
And so the impression of some of the members of that committee was, okay, so if the city commission decided to go ahead and add cameras, where would you recommend they add them? That is a big difference than saying that the red light camera committee recommended that we add a certain number of cameras. One is, if the commission's gonna add them, here's where they ought to be. But many members on that red light camera committee are not making a recommendation to us about how many cameras they should have. I've just talked to some of them, and that's not the way it was originally presented to them.
Well, how did it come out of theirs? What did their resolution say? Because they turned back a deal to us that had specific instructions. So I don't want to question what they put in writing.
Well, but the impression was that the city commission is gonna decide how many cameras are added. And if they were gonna add some, where should they be added?
Who gave them that impression?
That's the impression that some of them left the meeting with,
Why?
because that's the way the conversation went.
Well, I'd like to go back to the first point, because I was on the commission when we first installed these, and I do not recall the initial intention being an assumption we didn't have police officers to guard it. I do not remember that at all. I don't agree with that assumption. That assumption was, your assumption is, that the initial intention was we didn't have enough officers, and now that we've added officers, that was not.
Well, now, Mayor, were you on the commission
Yes,
when we implemented
absolutely
red light
was.
cameras?
Absolutely was. Sure, sat there. You can check it if you don't believe me.
Well, I'm not gonna
I was
disbelieve
there.
you, but I'm gonna say there were a lot of discussions with a lot of people.
I
And
was
that,
there through the whole thing, and I remember never discussing we didn't have enough officers to watch intersections. I think that assumption's incorrect assumption.
okay,
Pull all the records, but I think it's incorrect.
I would tend to agree with that.
well, that is one of the reasons that the program was sold to me, and that was my understanding, having studied all that we've increased the number of our officers, and that we did really not have the officers available at that time to adequately do traffic enforcement and sit at intersections and watch
Never really
red light.
correlating that to discussion. In fact, I think.
Can I do my third point?
Yeah.
Okay. My third point is that, we're worried about dangerous intersections. And in fact, that's what the traffic department has done a good job of, is identifying which are the dangerous. But yet, the funds that are generated through this program are generally used for traffic safety. Maybe lights, maybe bridges, maybe crosswalks, maybe pedestrian maybe under the bridges to prevent. But there's no specific attention to the intersections in question that we're judging to be dangerous, and therefore we've got to put up red light cameras. One would think that if we're going to generate revenue with red light cameras, the least thing we ought to do is focus on traffic safety at those intersections that we think are the most dangerous in town. And that's another concern I have, is I don't feel like that red light camera revenue should be just another source of revenue that supplants general revenue we would otherwise have to spend on that department.
Well, but I think a lot of that is directed or guided or forced by state law. That here are things that you can spend that money for. And one of them is not to throw it back in the till in the general revenue fund. So it has to be used for safety-related issues. And these things that we have spent it on all qualify. And there's probably others that we have not spent red light revenue on.
Well, actually, Jim, if I remember when we passed this, that wasn't the norm, but following that, the state said you must spend it on it. So when we originally passed this, that was not a standard. You could do whatever you wanted with it. And then later, they came back and said the only way it's going to be good is if you spend it on safety. And it was about a year or so later. I would ask this too, though. I think we're again making an assumption. We're assuming that the structure of the intersection is wrong. Now, if there's something we can do to address the structure of the intersection, I think we should do it. But I'm not suggesting the structure of the intersection is wrong. Cameras to address the driver who's breaking the law when they go through the intersection. I don't think one assumes the other. I don't think that we're going to assume that because a driver breaks the law and runs a red light, it doesn't deal with much else except a driver running a red light. There's something structurally wrong with that intersection. If we identify, I'd agree wholeheartedly, if we can identify some structural fallacy with that intersection, then deal with it.
Correct.
But I think the real problem that we're trying to address is drivers that aren't And I saw it on the video where I changed my mind 180 degrees on whether to vote for this or not. When I saw the video, I changed my mind totally. I was against it. I thought it was an invasion when I first started. I resolved the part about an invasion of privacy. And then when I saw the video that goes with the still pictures that do that, the video that went with it, it was simply a matter of drivers blatantly trying to push the edge and putting people at risk that were assuming there was a free passage on a green light. So it put the burden on the people at a green light that were following it correctly, nothing wrong with the structure, and some person that was going to exceed the speed limit and run the red light, usually both happened, was what was causing these wrecks. And so some poor person assuming a green light and not being able to assume that because some person is going to run that light. That's what changed my mind. I said, we have to add to the safety. So I don't agree, again, the assumption that there could be a structural intersection problem. If there is, let's fix it. I think there's a driver problem. I think all it indicates is there's a driver that's too aggressive or thinks they have a right to run a red light and put somebody at a green light at risk, an innocent person at risk, and that's what got me to vote for it. Nothing to do with structure, nothing to do with police officers. I want you to know that none of those things are why I voted for it. And I don't think any of the commissioners that I recall had any discussion about, now they're questions, but I do not recall those questions being raised in the prior discussion. And I'd ask to pull the record if we want to see if there was any of that.
TxDOT has discussed that. That's why they're changing the on and off ramps as an MPO project on I-40 as they head in toward Coulter and Sunset.
They're discussing what now?
Changing the in ramps and on ramps.
Now how does that relate to this?
Because the way that it's set up is, if you want to go, you might tell me this, if you want to get off on Coulter, they're reversing them, because the way that you're exiting you're having to get off on Coulter exit to get to the businesses if you're heading west between Coulter and Sunset, Texas Dodge, all those. And so it ends up
North side.
on the north side. So you end up with all this traffic at that corner of Coulter and I-40 that really doesn't belong there.
It belongs
further down. And so one of the problems is that you have these huge volumes that's artificially created. And my only point is that that's a common kind of occurrence. I learned that working on the NPO and looking at the way they structure the loop and all that. And so if there is an intersection that's just to be particularly dangerous, I think we have one additional obligation to do something, or at least intently analyze that intersection to see if there are some structural changes that can be made to improve the safety. And I think that should be the thing that should be looked at first.
I don't think that it's wrong to do that, but the other part is that most of those changes, you're on the MPO, I am, it's very expensive changes, hugely expensive, that really dealt with through a lot of TxDOT dollars that come back from the Fed and through the state and back to us. And I think the amount of money we spent on this, if I'm not wrong, in 3 years is $100,000 that we netted out of this in a 3-year period. We didn't, I mean, it doesn't produce a tremendous, in relation to changing an on-ramp. I think an on-ramp would be a huge expense compared to what this generates in a year. This really suffices to put in 2 or 3 stoplights. It's not a lot of money.
Beginning in the first complete year, the net back to the city was 290, and then 208, 185, and then the most recent year 162.
I mean, if we could budget-wise, and if we could have an effect on those intersections, I sure think it's something to study. But I don't think it should stop us moving ahead with this, because I think these topics, it runs back to what got me convinced to vote for this back in '05, was the dramatic influence that the videos had to me when I saw people blatantly speeding up, running lights, and some innocent on the other side was proceeding with a green light and fully at risk to lose their life or get property damage because somebody blatantly and foolishly and aggressively ran a light. That's why I didn't see a structural problem. I saw a driver problem, an attitude problem.
I'd like to bring up a question I asked Jared this week about behavior. because, and Jared, will you chime in here with the answer, because I just barely had time to read it when I was on my way over here.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see Jerry around here.
I think he went to get some copies
Okay.
if we need them.
Okay, the question I asked was, does the research show that red light cameras change behavior only while they're at the intersection? Or once an intersection has fewer wrecks because there's a red light camera there, does that behavior change stay even if you move the red light camera to other places? And that way, could we move the red light cameras around and still contain, what does the research show? Is it only safe while the red light camera is there? Or does it change behavior over a period of time? And so what does the research show?
What we sent you were two news articles that were pulled. Both of them were cases to where cities had removed a program, so they had controlled X number of intersections and then were controlling none. I would not claim those to be scientific studies or news reports. Both of those showed that the violation rate and the accident rate went up pretty dramatically where there had been
After the
a control.
So it's just the presence of the red light camera that
There's I think
affects behavior.
there's a presumption, and a presumption only, that there's a deterrence effect.
But there's a
They have to be
percentage,
signed, very obviously. I think that's
there's a percentage of people who go through a red light camera once, get a ticket, and then really watch it everywhere. I
Well,
mean,
because
there's no doubt.
haven't the numbers shown that other uncontrolled,
Monitored.
unmonitored intersections have had less accidents and less red light lanes? Or we don't have numbers on that, is that an assumption?
I don't know. I don't have any problem at all with, if we think there's a structural problem with an intersection that's adding to this, that we could do something. But I didn't see that. What I saw was people blatantly and aggressively negating the public safety and running a light for their communities. And it became more and more,
I do think that involves volumes of traffic, because when you're having to wait through 3 cycles, that's when people get more aggressive. So
it was nighttime they were doing it.
there's a plan on Saucy to kind of change there by the mall, the configuration of those intersections, so that there's an additional lane and there's better handling of traffic.
And limitation on which direction you can convert to a different.
Right.
Where can you have a left turn, where can you not?
Right, and so those kind of things to help get to the fundamental of the problem before you're ever sitting at the red light with the opportunity to run it. I think it gets even further upstream on the safety aspect. So that's all I'm asking the commission to do, is if you're gonna do this, is to give a nod toward doing everything you can to improve the safety of that intersection in other manners rather than just red light cameras.
But those were text dot, 2 of those were text dot, aren't they?
All of these.
All
are
the
fixed
text
by
dot.
right of ways.
And I mean, I've driven down Amarillo Boulevard in those intersections, and I don't know what else we could do to make it structurally more sound. I mean, you come off 287 both ways, and you split, you go down Pierce or whatever the street is. And I mean, there's not anything we can do to change the layout of the land to make additional lanes and all that kind of stuff, or I don't think TxDOT will. And Amarillo Boulevard's pretty straightforward, just lanes going east and west.
I forget, is that a continuous turn lane in the middle?
It's not,
Depends.
because those 4 dispersals are one ways, so one this, one that.
2 north and 2 south.
But I think
They alternate.
something that brings those thoughts up is when we were talking at MPO, they're certainly gonna look at Saucy and some places on Culture to limit that suicide lane, so people don't get in and don't go
Suicide
directly.
lane.
That's on Saucy.
That's what they call it, a suicide.
They do, that's Saucy.
And
no safety.
it's well, I mean, that's a pretty good name for it. When you get out there and see it, I don't go near it from November till January. I just don't go over there. The same thing is true though on Western, where we took out some of those dividers before. It's true on Georgia. It's true on other things, and we have just got, I mean, I think that it would be very difficult for this, for the monies or for this intention to solve those things. I think we can deal with those things, but I think it's sort of a separate issue. It's a pretty broad issue across the city that as we've grown in population, we said 22,000 people moved here last 10 years. We've grown since 1950 from 74,000 to 200,000. We got 700 more miles of paved streets since 1950. We just got a lot of things that are hitting us. But I don't think this is going to fix that. I think I can give you a list that is never ending, that the MBO can't fix with millions of dollars.
Brian, I think we would be remiss if anyone of knowledge or expertise made us aware of structural problems at an intersection, and we didn't insist that it be corrected. Either we correct it or TxDOT, depending on who has ownership and control of that intersection. I can't imagine that happening.
Whether or not we're doing these, to me, they're independent because we need to fix that no matter what. If
Yeah.
we're missing the structural problem that's causing possible injuries or property damage or death, we gotta fix it. And I think our engineers watch that every day. I think what we've come up with here is a new
I
tool.
think we have control.
Well, and recently there have been questions of pedestrian issues at high volume, you know. So do you consider things like pedestrian issues at one of these high volume intersections, is that considered health safety or is it not? You know, have we done everything we should to protect bicyclers and pedestrians? I mean, it kind of goes off into another generation of issues, but that's all, is I think these are dangerous intersections.
We
and
have a responsibility for safety.
Every
Regardless of who the recipient of the unsafe conditions are.
Amarillo Boulevards have a lot of pedestrian accidents, but not at those intersections, they're usually
Well, that's
further
good to
east.
hear.
And I think that this gentleman will echo, we're talking about structural things that might need to be done at intersections, with or without monitors taking pictures. We'll jump on those, like,
We're always on the you're always on the lookout for things like that.
Absolutely. Jerry, I do remember this committee had brought up some pedestrian questions, and listening to those tapes,
Yes.
haven't you made some changes because of things this committee identified on sequencing or timing of some of the headlights?
Well, there was a recent change to the Texas METCD that reduced the pedestrian
Manual,
walk rate.
manual on uniform?
Uh,
That
The
helps
Texas
with that.
Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. They reduced the walk rate from 4 feet per second to 3.5 feet per second.
We're getting slower.
We're getting slower. It just provides more time for the pedestrians to finish crossing the street once they've started. And as far as the bicycles go, Texas law considers them another vehicle on the street. They need to obey the traffic signals, the stop signs. They need to ride on the street, not on the sidewalk, just like any other vehicle.
When you came up with the most dangerous intersections and you presented them to the traffic commission, do you routinely then look at why it's the most dangerous?
Absolutely. Well, first off, accidents are just that. They're accidents. They can't, for that reason, they can't be counted upon. So one intersection may have a high crash rate 1 year and not be on the list for 3 more years. Others may routinely stay on the list for whatever reasons. Every year, we look at the accidents in the city, and we take the number of accidents at each intersection, and we rank them from whatever the high number is to whatever the low number is. And we look at the top 10 usually. This year, I believe we looked at 14 to see if there's, and myself and my field superintendent, our traffic signal foreman, and the rest of my staff will then sit down and meet and try to determine whether or not there's anything we can do to that intersection to reduce the type of traffic accidents we have. Because there's obviously more than one kind of traffic accident. They're all not all right angle accidents. Some are rear end accidents, some are side swipes. So we'll look at that and we'll see if there's anything at all that we can do. If we have a lot of right angle accidents where it appears that people say, a permissive left turn lane, are taking unacceptable gaps, we may take that permissive left turn movement away and make it protected only, as we did on 45th at Western this year, to see if that will reduce the accident rate at that location. So these have all been reviewed for any kind of a sight distance problem, if there's we've got back plates on all of the mast arm mounted traffic signal heads. They've all been upgraded to the 12-inch lenses. We've gotten rid of the programmable visibility heads, which are hard to see sometimes, that they used for the left turn lanes years ago. And we've got those with the LED heads now, more visible. We're going through, as we get the time and the money, we're putting the back plates on the pole mounted heads as well. Some of the pole mounted heads aren't able to accept a back plate, so as we get the time and the money, we're replacing those head assemblies as well.
So the ones you gave to the traffic commission, the intersections then were driver problems then?
Yes.
And then the answer to my question, Jared kind of answered it, but you did the research on if you just move the cameras around, does it affect behavior? In other words, the camera has to be there to affect behavior, or does the intersection stay safer when you move the camera?
I wasn't able to find any direct research either direction, but there were several articles written that show that moving cameras does maintain the behaviors, and actually just having the cameras in town at different locations does have kind of an umbrella effect when somebody, because a lot of people take a great deal of pride in not running red lights and things like that. They get one of these in the mail and they go, holy cow. Okay, I need to pay a little more attention.
Everywhere.
And so there is an umbrella effect to having the cameras.
And Jerry, that article you sent, where they had taken them out entirely, what doesn't show?
That article, the author of the article said that accidents had jumped, I think he said 400%.
And again, not saying that's scientific research the way it was presented.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the speeds went up as well.
Thank you.
Is that our timer? We have the worksheets from that committee, and we have the minutes with their recommendation, if anybody would need to see that.
I think you bring up interesting things, Brian, that are structurally, none of us sitting here would avoid a structural problem in the intersection. And I don't think that these cameras are gonna fix any structural problem. If the two exist, we gotta fix them. I really think though that for me, to add, a small number, we've got more streets, more square foot, we're growing the city. I think this is a reasonable answer to what, there are a lot of varying views. I think it's a reasonable answer to what a lot of people's varying views are. And after seeing those videos, I just gotta tell you, I feel a little more protected if there's some kind of,
And on an issue that you brought up that's interesting, the number of police officers that are on the street and that are available for patrol. I think this is an assist to those numbers, because I still don't know that we have adequate. I don't think we're at that level
We
yet.
still need to increase it.
4 years.
I think we do.
4 or 5 more years. Plus, the city will grow in that time, so you gotta factor in, if the demographers are right, we grew 22,000 last 10 years, you grow 35, if they're right, at the high end, 35. Then
That was before
35.
you were elected mayor.
Yeah, that's true, it could be less. So the number of officers just for that 35,000, we're looking at a little less than 2 per thousand, right?
I'm sorry, Mayor, say that again.
We're looking at 2 officers for every
Two
1,000.
per thousand, and
We
we're
wrote
at about,
30,000.
we're about
We
170.
need 15 more officers in the next 10 years that will continue to grow behind catching up. So I don't see us getting ahead of that one.
And philosophically, y'all probably disagree with me, but I don't think red light cameras are invasion of privacy. I think if you're gonna if you're gonna break a law, then you're gonna break a law whether someone sees you do it or not. It's not okay to break a law if no one sees you do it. Still not okay.
Well, I came around to your side on that, watching the video. It scared the bejeebers out of you watching this video. Remember the one poor guy?
You got thrown up into the car?
Well, yeah, but what happened is the car comes to the intersection, over 100 miles an hour, hits another car, the car goes up in the air, the guy's walking across the street, a pedestrian at 2 in the morning, and it flips over the top of him and lands, and he was not injured at all. And they said the ironic thing about it was the guy was walking because he got his license plate for DWI about a month before. And he survived.
Well,
We
just,
saw some crazy things.
I think that maybe we didn't couch our instructions carefully enough or clearly enough, but obviously if we have boards and commissions and we ask them to provide us with a recommendation, no matter what it is, that we will take it as a consideration. Doesn't mean we're going to act on it or anything, but when they give us a recommendation, we're going to take it seriously. Otherwise, why have boards and commissions? Or special committees or whatever. So I think that needs to be very clearly understood, that when we give someone a charge and they're going to make a recommendation to the city commission, we will consider it. We may not do anything with it. We may approve all of it, or we may take pieces of it, but we are going to take that seriously as a recommendation.
And when you have a commission that's diverse, you're going to get varying views, and that's great. I'm glad we do, but we take them seriously.
It may be a bit of a semantic difference. The statute says that in placing red light cameras, you must have a citizen board and for them to advise the governing body. So in that sense, the report from the committee was their advice. If you're going to do cameras, here are the intersections here's how we would rank the intersections. There may be some substantive difference between advice and recommendation. I guess that's free for people to debate that semantic difference, advice versus recommendation. It may also be fair to categorize or describe the committee report in accordance with the statute that they provided their advice to the city commission. If you're going to have cameras, here's the intersections.
And I think they specifically recommended that if you do this, you do at least a minimum of these 4. I don't know how that fits with.
And perhaps some individual committee members are more sensitive to what nuance may exist between advice and recommend. When you advise a client, are you recommending that that patient do thus and so? It's your advice to them. You certainly recommend they do that. I don't know where that line is drawn.
Well, the memo from Jerry Bird says, the members voted 5-0 to recommend the city commission consider removal of the red light camera at Pierce Street and Southeast 3rd Avenue and relocating it to Tascosa Road and Emerald Boulevard northbound approach. They also voted 5-0 to recommend that at least 3 of the highest ranking intersections be considered for new cameras. The minutes of the meeting, including the proposed intersections, approaches, and the total scores are attached. That's the way Mickey does with.
Well, do we want to, Ryan, you brought it up, do you want to remove this for separate consideration at the meeting?
It'll be, Brian, it'll be Williams, and then if we remove it, it'll be Brian's, and if you don't make it, just let me know.
Square deal.
Democracy in action.
I think if you don't see it coming, just make the motion.
No.
Hey, good discussion. Any more questions? Anything we can help provide on item D? Item E, your 3 dedication and acceptances for the week. We have a drainage easement, an ingress egress easement, that is for emergency vehicles, primarily fire trucks, and then a common area dedication out at the greenways. Continued new growth out there.
Is that from a pit?
It's in a pit.
Okay.
Okay, any questions on the agenda as a whole? Mayor, if we could, we'd ask for a closed session and see how far we can work our way through today's item.
The Mayor Commission